Hi, I'm Sarah Blewett, an instructional designer at UTLO, and today I'm going to be showing you some of the research I've done in engagement in online learning, and specifically looking at how we can use engagement as an indicator to predict student success. But this is not an easy problem to solve because quantifying engagement is extremely difficult, and this is because engagement is an abstract concept. But through my research, I was able to find a way to do this through pedagogical framing, which we'll be looking at. So in 2020, we switched to online. And over again, we saw the impact that engagement had on online learning and why engagement was so important. But often it was viewed as a very negative thing. We heard things like, there's no engagement, therefore there's decreased course completion and there's increased dropout rates. There's no engagement, so we don't know what our students are doing. There's no visibility. And there's no engagement, so simply online learning is just ineffective. And this is all correct. Engagement is vitally important to online learning. In fact, there was a paper written by Watt and his team, and they came up with the top 3 critical success factors for online learning. And those were technology, instructors, and engagement. So we can see just how important engagement is in online learning. We can see the importance of engagement in multiple layers of an online course. If a course is built with the potential for high levels of student engagement, we'll see increased course activity. We'll see an insight into what students are doing, which activities are they completing, which activities are they spending a lot of time on. And this gives us a better insight into visibility, into what students are actually doing, and we then have a better understanding of where there could be potential issues. And if we can form a relationship between certain activities and how students are performing, then we can use this relationship to generate predictions. But this is all dependent on the conceptualization of engagement. So if we can conceptualize it correctly, then this will be a huge game changer. So quickly looking at some models that are already out there, the first most common model that is used to conceptualize engagement is looking at resources invested. So this is simply using things like the time and effort students put into learning activities and using this as a proxy for engagement. Now, there's one huge problem with this, and that is just because a student spent 2 hours on an activity, that does not mean that they were more engaged. In fact, it most likely means that they were less engaged and distracted. So in order to try and combat this, researchers took multidimensional models which combined the constructs such as time and effort with other constructs such as behavior, cognition, emotion, and communication in order to try and create a more holistic view of engagement. But what was the problem with this? So a potential problem with observational measures such as the 2 I spoke about is they provide limited information on the actual quality of the engagement. So although these models can be split into various types of engagement, they provide no way of determining the actual activities that led to this engagement in the first place. And this is vitally important as it cannot be presumed that all activities amount to the same level of student engagement. Therefore, they just cannot be measured in the same way. By nature, certain activities demand more engagement from the student. So a simple example of this is if a student is going through their lecture notes, they're not that engaged in the activity, whereas if you give them a quiz to answer, they have to apply their mind much more, or even more so, if you gave them an assignment, they would have to be even further engaged in the activity in order to just complete it. So what is the solution to this conceptualization problem? To measure engagement, we need to know how it is created. And the answer to this how, is the pedagogic framing. So why pedagogy? We know pedagogy is crucial to the success of any EdTech integration. And a popular framework that supports this is the TPACK model. I know most of you have probably heard about this model before, but quickly for those who haven't, TPACK says that there's 3 things that we need for successful EdTech integration, and that is technical knowledge, content knowledge, and pedagogical knowledge. So when people build these predictive models, our focus is often on the content, of course, the data, we need that, and then the technology, the machine learning model. And these two things are great. We can create very efficient models, but without adding pedagogy, we are going to find that we aren't creating effective models. This is because by looking at how teaching is happening online, we can determine how the engagement is being created. But even once we know how it is happening, we still need a way to determine, is the engagement effortful or is it not? To do this, we need a model that can help us group certain pedagogical online activities based on the level of engagement they require from a student. So I used a model called the Activated Connected Teaching model to do this, and for anyone who hasn't heard of this model before, it is a taxonomy of 6 different pedagogies that can be used to promote levels of engagement in online learning. But the reason it works so well is that these engagement levels are ranked, with consumption being the pedagogy which brings in the least engagement, up to chaos, which requires high student engagement. So by using this model, I could then take the different activities available in Moodle and group them into these different pedagogies as shown on the table here. And I could then conclude if a student, for example, completed an activity under correction, such as a quiz, that should be weighted more highly than another student who completed an activity under the consumption, so a lesson, for example. So I used this scale from 1 to 6 to rank the different activities, and if a student completed an activity, it was given the respective rating to the pedagogy. So let's get into the mind of the algorithm to see exactly where I went from there. So firstly, I had to obtain access to online courses and anonymize all the data. I then, as we saw in the previous slide, grouped the activities into the different ACT pedagogies. I then used the weighting of the ACT pedagogies to calculate an engagement score. And finally, in order to test the accuracy of the model, I took the engagement score and I took the final mark as the courses were all completed, and I tested the correlation between the two. So if they had a close correlation, this meant that I had created a model that was a good predictor. So the aim was to get as close a correlation as possible. The higher, the better. So now looking at the accuracy results based on correlation. I firstly did a random test just as a control, obviously expecting that to be very low. It just generated random predictions. I then implemented the engagement model, and that gave me a correlation percentage of 73%. In order to see if this was good or not and kind of gauge if it was a good predictor, I used linear regression. And a linear regression model works in a way that it determines the weightings for itself. So it completely ignored the pedagogies and it determined the weightings that it felt was correct. And it gave me an accuracy of 65. I then tried to combine the two, and I didn't get any better result than my original model, only getting 73. But I was very happy with these results. The model that was using the pedagogies was doing better than the machine learning linear regression model that was trying to determine the weights itself. So from here, I tried to use deep learning with the pedagogies to see if I could get an even better result. And I did. So on the screen, you can see there's the line, which is the prediction line, and then there are all the data points, which are the actual results. And you can see simply by looking at that it has determined quite an accurate prediction line, and I got a correlation of 93%. So combining the pedagogies with this deep learning 1D convolutional network, I was able to obtain the best results. So what have we learned? We've learned that active digital pedagogies promote various levels of online engagement, and that these activities can be grouped pedagogically based on the level of engagement activities require. These groupings allow for a better understanding of effortful online engagement, and this results in a model that can determine the level of student engagement in an online course. So in conclusion, by grouping the activities pedagogically using the ACT model, as well as combining that with deep learning, we were able to create a model that was a good predictor of student success. And more so, it performed even better than the linear regression model that ignored the pedagogies completely and tried to determine the weightings for itself. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.